Ahead and call the meeting of the Range Task Force to order. Clerk, will we please have a roll call?
Member Bagwell.
Present.
Member Blackwood.
Present.
Member Bunkowski.
Here.
Member Fontanez.
Here.
Member Gerlani.
Here.
Member Hillis.
Here.
Member Howell.
Here.
Member Keller. Member Robinson. Member Wall.
I'm here for all.
Shooty, not
That was a
roll.
substitute.
Yeah, it's Shooty.
It's Shooty.
We're supposed to call Mr. Robinson.
Okay. Oh, you have one that's a phone call in? Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do have a quorum, sorry.
That's okay. So we start off all our meetings with public comment. They will be limited to 3 minutes because I have a guess that we're gonna have lots of public comment. We have comment after each item. Also, you may comment at the beginning or specifically on the item that we're gonna discuss. We only have the room for 2.5 hours, so I wanna thank the sheriff for
Hi, Steve.
giving us this room, and our other one is under construction right now, so we had to borrow a different room. So we'll start off, is there any general public comment that someone would like to
Try
make?
to do speakerphone on my cell phone,
Okay, oh,
if that's okay
yes.
for you.
You'll need to come up to the table, there's a mic there,
Okay,
and
that
sign
works.
in,
And,
and
I'll do my
then,
best to try to keep
that's
the
good.
phone
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Robinson.
It's already on. Should be on.
My name's Terry Tussey, I'm a pistol smith, and it affects me because I can't test guns, which is kind of hard for me. But the range, I believe, helps out more people than any other park. The fairgrounds doesn't bring in many people. I mean, we're talking about a huge amount of people. And so I think we better be working on just exactly how to fix it. And don't worry about the finger pointing unless it points to a higher curve.
Thank you, and what was your name?
Terry Tussey.
So I show that you're actually on the actual committee.
That's all true.
Okay, so that it can be reflected in the minutes, he's actually a member of the task force. So, thank you, Terry. Is there any other general public comment? You can just come to the.
I hope you don't mind if I read this. This is very, very emotional for me, and I need to keep my thoughts together. So, first off, thank you for letting me speak today. The range issues have frustrated all of us for a long time. We all know that. It's the only 2A park in the community, and I mean, it's the only place that we can go. I want to extend an apology to some of you, especially Jen, probably Lori. This is a hugely emotional issue for me, and you'll understand why. When I was 18 years old, I was stalked, and unbeknownst to me, my attacker was breaking in my home and watching me sleep. When he was done with that, he broke in and raped me in front of my family. And obviously it still affects me. I was scared to death of guns until I became a police officer. And I learned a respect. I learned not to be afraid, and I felt empowered and safe for the first time in my life. I have relived that attack and become very hypervigilant several times in my life. One when he escaped and was near my home as I was pregnant with my youngest daughter. And most recently, now. I'm sorry, unless you have been there, you cannot even begin to understand the gut-wrenching primal fear that comes with the feeling that it's going to happen again. So after a lot of internal thought discussion with my husband, I thought it's time for me to share. I set up my first ladies only, and it's a combination ladies only and weaponless self-defense class. I advertised it. I had one class on Thursday morning. By Saturday I had 6, all full with a waiting list. And this was before the gentleman was caught. And I felt that I could share my story that way, and maybe for people that have not been through something like this, understand ways that you can protect yourself. The range is now closed. I have classes this coming Saturday through March. Our distances to shoot are 3, 5, and 7 yards. Every shooter is very closely monitored. I only have 3 or 4 shooters at a time. I have another RSO with me at all times. I'm insured. I'm a chief RSO. By taking our bookings away from the range, you basically told the citizens of our city that, sorry, but you're going to have to figure out another way to protect yourself. And that is just not fair. Many of these ladies have never touched a gun. We want to go into the base because they want to come to a ladies only class so they're not along the line with a bunch of other people that have been shooting for years. It's intimidating, it's frightening. When we take that away, and I'm sorry, I'm stumbling, I don't mean to, I don't want to run out of time. We usually hold our classes on Saturdays. When I leave on Saturday afternoon, I get out there at 2 o'clock. There's never a line for the nurse.
Christy?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I have to hold you to the 3 minutes, but I think we have resolution for you.
No.
And
I got the email. That does not work. CCW standards are 4-hour blocks, 2 of them. You can't do it with a 2-hour block.
we'll work on it, okay? We're committed to working to solve this particular issue that you're bringing up, the safety for the whole community and all of those that need to take their coursework. We'll work with you.
Okay, I'm gonna leave this up here. These are the home invasion stats, if somebody wants to look at that. But Nevada Chiefs and Sheriff, I spoke with them today. You either have to have 2 4-hour blocks within 15 days or 1 8-hour block. And you can't do the shooting in the morning. You have to do the shooting after the classroom. So I saw the email.
We'll work with you to accommodate.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Christy Scott, I'm the owner of Battle Board Ammunition and Firearms.
Okay, you said it, I just missed it.
That's okay. I probably didn't say it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment?
Good afternoon, my name is William Brown, I'm a local CCW instructor in this area, and I've been an instructor for about 6 to 7 years now. With the tragedies in Carterville and South Reno, in one day, I got 30 signups. The majority of them signups were elderly women scared, including one of the neighbors of Mrs. Rankin in Gardnerville. My days consist of giving CCW classes in Carson City. Since the range has been closed, my days are now up to 12 to 14 hours because I'm having to travel out of town to meet students' needs. Their shooting tests, getting all that stuff done. And there's so many other instructors around here are now either going out of business or they just don't know where to take their shooting test anymore. I'm a responsible instructor. I was chased off that range about 3 weeks ago, and I had a reservation out there. I was given a class all day, so I didn't know that the time had come up that we were supposed to not be out on the range. I had my range all the way back at the base, at the back of the backstop, 3, 5, and 7. People are coming into other areas where I'm teaching and spending their monies in them communities. Please, let's get this resolved for the whole community and the commercial businesses in the area. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
My name's David Moore, and I'm just retired and a pot stirrer, so that's why I'm here. I don't know if you guys are aware that under the grant deed from the BLM, there's a restriction on one of the parcels that it is for rifle and pistol range purposes only. So if you decide to do something else, because there's rumors flying around that the dump wants to go into there, there's rumors there's gonna be houses in there, BLM's gonna take the land back if you do that. The other thing I'd like to know is if the dump is going to be attacking us and having us to close, I wanna know if the methane detectors have been installed on the expansion yet. Is that included under the environmental impact report for there? Little things like that. Does that also qualify for another detection well? If not, get out of that area, problem solved.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes. Okay. Another one there, and then we'll try to get started.
My name's Dave Lester. I just wanted to say in regards to this, I've been having to shoot other places, and I don't know what the rules are. And everyone here is a law-abiding citizen, okay? There's not a person in this room that doesn't want to do the right thing, okay? But we're not sure what. I've been shooting other places. Kenny, I don't know the rules. I don't know how far I need to be away from places. I don't know what the rules are of where I can shoot. And no one here wants to break the law. No one here wants to start a fire come springtime. No one wants a ricochet to go where it doesn't, safely land. But we don't know. We have nowhere to go. We're forced out in the hills here, and every time I do it, I worry. And I don't want to worry about it. I never worried about that at the range. I've been out there for 40 years, and I've never had a problem. And I worry every time I go out here, whether it's Gomri or 5th Street, or I've been going recently underneath the range out there. There's some sort of flat ground out there. There will ride motorcycles and RVs out there. There's about a 20-foot embankment there. I'd be shooting against that. But I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to start a fire. And yet I don't know what else to do and where to go. And so if nothing else, could we get some published rules of what is acceptable, Kenny? And the other thing is you trusted us. I'm sure everyone in this room has a CCW. Your name is on my CCW, and I appreciate the hell out of it. I do. You trusted me. And I don't want to break that trust. I really don't, and I respect it. And so that's what I have to say. Okay? I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to cause anyone any pain. I don't want to start any fires, but I need some help. Okay? All right, thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, then we're gonna move on the agenda. We don't have any minutes this particular meeting, it's just standard on the agenda. Ms. Budge, is there any modifications that you're aware of? No modifications, okay, we're on to our first action item, and we'll split this in two. We have to nominate technically a chair and a vice chair to run the task force, so is there any nominations for a chairman?
I'll nominate you. You're on the Parks Department, you're on the board, you can take the reports to vote, and you're in the seat already.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Sir, can I get your name for the second?
David Hills.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we will take a vice chair nomination. Anybody for vice chair?
Nick.
Nick? Sean, are you making that as a, so Sean Girolani for Nick from, you're willing? I better ask you if you want to. You might have to do it.
Yeah, I will take that.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Steve, any further discussion?
The only
Steve Schutte was the second, I'm sorry.
The only question I would have, Nick, is, I understand we're under open meeting laws. Are you familiar with those?
No, but I've got my manual here, so nobody's volunteered for the position.
Okay. I'm just-
You're prepared. Okay. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Is there any general, we don't usually have public comment on elections, so is there any public comment? Christie?
Is there a list of who the task force members are? Because I don't
Yes.
think we all know. I mean, the public.
Yes, and we can post it out on the, normally what happens, we're formed, we have chairs now, so it'll post on the city website. They always post all the membership to all our boards and commissions. You're welcome. Okay. So we're holding the microphone, so I'm sorry. Okay, the next item is for discussion only, and it's a review for our goals and objectives of the range and for this task force. Super Member Bonkowski, do you want to speak first? Have you listed?
Well, I guess my only comments would be that I think we have two supervisors as part of this committee that are shooters and are advocates for not only keeping the range open as much as we can and keep everybody safe, but getting it back open 7 days a week as soon as possible. So I just want everybody here to understand that somebody mentioned earlier that there's rumors flying around about houses going in, about landfill wanting to take over the rifle range. None of those rumors are true. The rifle range is going to be fixed and it's going to get back open as soon as we can safely do it. So be sure that will happen. We will make a commitment to find money somewhere to do this. I mean, obviously, two of us don't control the board, but at least, yeah, two members of the board that are here advocating on their behalf right now. So I just want everybody to know that this is, all those rumors that you're hearing out there in some cases that you are perpetuating, we need to put those down because none of them are true. Like the reference did not get close.
I think that that's a very good comment, that anything this is coming out well for the others to, okay, thanks, Kim. I think what Supervisor Bonkowski just stated is a very good and clear message to all of you, that we are really looking for you to help us solve this issue so we can open it just as quickly as possible. And that includes helping us in the social media. There's been a lot of things out there that really are not helpful. They don't help drive it to a positive solution and message that we want to put out to the entire community. So anything all of you can do to help us would be just greatly appreciated. We're here to solve this problem and to accommodate as much as we can. I don't know any other better way to say it than that I'm sorry about the rumors, but I assure you the board has already, by forming this task force, showing the commitment to the community that we intend to put the resources to get this opened. But we have to do a few safety and compliance things to get there, and together we can. So, public comment, and I guess what, Jen, I would, yeah, but I'm gonna need the microphone to be passed around, is what, the one from the table. So if somebody can control the microphone for the members. Let me switch to. So Nancy's gonna help us with the microphone, okay. So really, in your packets for the members of the board here, it kind of goes through what the purpose of the task force is. And then as we walk through some of the agenda items, we can talk about methodologies as a group as to who might take what assignments to help push it faster, right? Instead of meeting maybe as committees as a whole, we might take some leads or some point people to take on a task to help do it faster, right? Because the sooner we can get to things, the sooner we can get it open. And again, that's the ultimate goal. So this task force can look at operations, it can look at the safety components, it can maybe help us find vendors that are willing to help us to get the jobs done quickly. And so those will be some of the roles that each of us can help. So that's kind of the background on that. But do we have public comment on the general item? Thank you, City Manager will help us with the microphone. We want to make sure it's recorded so that those that couldn't be here can get the information.
Yeah, I'm Terry Tuskey again. Don't get bored already. If we could work on the range at the same time as using it, and maybe open a certain day, the city actually controls that dump, right?
Correct?
So they can close it a day or an afternoon or 2 afternoons, except of course, your local handyman and your local homeowner is Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday. We're closed on Sunday.
Yeah. But during the week, maybe we could get a half a day for a guy, do it in the morning and something like that.
Yeah, so we'll give it to Supervisor Gronkowski.
Terry, unfortunately, we looked at that and we have a contractual obligation with Waste Management, so we can't close the landfill during the week, because that was one of the things that we looked at,
Yeah.
trying to accommodate a weekday and a weekend day for people to go out and shoot. But if we do that, then we have to reimburse Waste Management for them to take their trucks to Fernley or Lockwood to dump all the trash, and there's no way that we can afford to do that.
Because we want to keep the money that we might have available to actually fix the range. I don't want to, right? If you look at the thing, I'm like, oh no, save that money and put it in the range so we can get it open. That's really our objective. But do more public comment. If you guys, yeah, there you go. Nancy will.
Along that same line, the dump is fairly big and they've been unloading the trucks in other areas in previous times. Why not just do something like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where they dump in another spot and the range can be open on those days?
I can let Mr. Cooley, is there any way to have coordinated dumping that would allow that flexibility?
Right now, no. We're filling that back area of the canyon, trying to shore up the mountain we built previously. The next area for us to go, which will be in a few years, is gonna be a front end, but that we're still pouring material out for cover. So we're still building that hole in order to fill it. So right now, no. And that's just the construction and demolition side. When you look at the municipal solid waste side, we're still filling that in, and that's what goes in the middle of this whole thing. So that's in another area. We actually have 3 working phases going, so trying to maneuver all those parts and pieces isn't that easy. It sounds like it's an easy solution, but it's not.
You know, I really appreciate that, because again, I think it helps dispel the rumors that I think some people assume we're not trying every little trick that we can come up with to open it, but keep bringing up ideas, because somebody might actually come up with something we could accommodate and work on.
Christy Scott again, I won't cry this time. So what about Saturday afternoons? Because here's the issue. These people that are getting CCWs work too. So Saturdays are the days they come for training. So I don't know about the other instructors, but I'm there, I go, most of my time is in the classroom, just because a lot of mine are new shooters, etc. I can easily go to the range same day from 2 to 5. And that gives everybody, I mean, if the dump was open maybe a little bit earlier, I don't know what hours it's open on Saturday, but if you guys could open it up to us, well, there's a lot of small businesses here that are failing. Mine started losing money when the dump first got closed because I'm the closest gun store to the dump. Ammunition sales have pretty much stopped as far as out of towners. And now my classes, which that's my rent, that's my bread and butter. I have one Saturday and I don't know what to do. The people have paid. I had all of my confirmations. And as soon as I started taking deposits, I didn't find out until 6:15 that Friday night that, sorry, all your reservations are done. So is the city going to be supportive of small businesses like that and consider opening on a Saturday for a few hours, or maybe opening on a Sunday for construction debris. I mean, we've got to work together, we've got to have some compromise, and I just don't see any compromise coming from the landfill. It's always been, you know, they moved the trash in a new area, so now we're having problems. And I don't see any compromise coming from there.
Thank you. We certainly can look at every option is out there to be reviewed. Carol?
Carol Howell, since we have ground of our goals, and it's very apparent that this is a hot issue, I'd like to suggest that this committee, this task force, meet at least bi-weekly so that the citizens, the business knows that we are not dragging this out. It's not going to be a 6-month process to get this done. So if we can meet and agree to meet on a bi-weekly basis,
That's on the agenda.
okay,
Yeah.
then I jumped ahead.
That's okay.
You're on a roll. That's okay. Yeah, we'll address the meetings when we get to that agenda. item.
Madam Chair, could I just interject really quick? Jennifer Bush, Carson Recreation Director. I just wanted for the record, we did have Steve Robinson on the phone, we did lose him. But Aaron Keller from the Nevada Department of Wildlife is here in attendance, so I just wanted to point that out.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sean?
I have a question, maybe it can be answered, maybe it can't. The smaller bays, pistol bays, I don't do that. Okay, I'm
Oh, it's, can you get up for the recording, Sean?
The smaller bays that are to the east of the pistol, is it Harvard? What? Well,
South end,
Can we get
4 bays?
anyways,
Mhm.
the four
Four
pistol
pistol
bays on
bays.
that far end, they're dug in deep enough. Would it be feasible to open those now?
Can we check for the agenda and then we'll probably answer some of the questions?
Because it seems like this whole ricochet issue kind of was spawned from the rifle range.
Let's all do this differently. It's not working. We can look at some of the issues because I know that, you know, potentially if you're only shooting at the 3, 5, and 7, and it's very, very controlled because we have a range officer in and of itself that controls those concealed weapon classes to begin with, we'll look at it. So it's on the table for a thought. No promise yet, but it's on the table because we're gonna have to, we should be getting the NRA report. We don't have that one, but we have some other stuff we'll get to later on the agenda and then see if we can address that.
Madam Chair, can I make a suggestion if you don't mind? In the spirit of trying to get through this as quickly as we can and get as much information out, if we could try to stick to the items on the agenda, and I believe under item D would be the best time for us to present the information we received from the 2 reports. And that would be a great time to ask some questions, and we have some handouts that we added as late material today to help answer some of these questions that some people might have.
And then for the public out there, we did put them on the side table there, some of the materials that Ms. Budge is discussing. Okay. Is there any more public comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Seems to me like we have a 3-issue problem. One, we need to get the range as.
Can I have you identify yourself?
Oh, sorry, Bob.
I'm so sorry, the clerk does not know everyone here today, so if I can have you identify yourself for the record, thank you.
Bob Blackwood. It seems to me like we have 3 aspects. One, we need to get the range open more frequently, immediately. Perhaps that can be accomplished by a Saturday opening with the landfill not working that back section so that we don't have the issues. 2, we need to get the range repaired for an extended use, a more permanent use. But 3, this isn't going to solve the problem. We need to consider a complete relocation of the shooting facility someplace else away from the city because we're just going to continue to have encroachment issues on our shooting facilities.
Thanks. Okay. Otherwise, okay, then we'll move on to item C, which is a presentation on the background of the rifle and pistol range and the information related to the creation of the task force and such.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just gonna walk through this pretty quickly because I know we have more pressing issues. I'm gonna walk you through the packet of information that you have in your binder. We're sharing now, we ran out of binders, so. I wanna just point you out to Carson Rifle and Pistol Range milestones. This gives you the history of the location, how we got there. We had a very similar issue. The rifle range actually used to be over by Eagle Valley Golf Course. There were issues. There was a wonderful citizens committee that was formed. They dedicated themselves along with NDOW and many other community partners to get to the location today. And then the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club and many community members helped work to make the range developed as it is today, which is truly a wonderful and grassroots accomplishment. And then also in your packet, you'll see the second page is just the most recent history of some of the funding and the grant sources generously provided by the Department of Wildlife. We've had Pittman-Robertson funding. We've had a lot of community support providing the match for those grants, which is so appreciated. The Ladies Gun Club, Carol has been a true advocate as well for that and helping us get the match for some of these grants. So I just wanted to give you a recent history of those funds and those obligations that go with the grants, because that needs to be a consideration as we move forward and the commitment we've made to our partners with those projects and those agreements. Next, you'll see a copy of the current use agreement with the Rifle and Pistol Club. It's going to actually be terminating in April. The Pistol Club is a wonderful community partner. We really appreciate their support. And the agreement is over 20 years old and it's just outdated and it's not accurate, as are many of our agreements within the city. And I know Supervisor Bagwell is very committed to having updated agreements and working with that. So we'll be working with the Pistol Club on discussions on what that might look like in the future, maybe considering a one-year agreement while we figure this all out. Not sure where that will go, but we need to make sure that the club has the available resources of what we're asking, and we need to all be on the same page with that future management of the range, whatever that might look like. So I just wanted you to have a picture of that current agreement, but it is very old. There's a lot of information about utilities that don't exist on site, and it's just not, it's very dated. But wanted to have that for you. Next is the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club, their standard operating procedures. That's also available on their website. There's a lot of wonderful information on the website on their page as well. Then you have copies of the public meeting notes from the informational meeting that we had. We had over 150 people in attendance, which was tremendous. And we had over 40 people show interest for this task force. So thank you to the community for really being interested in wanting to help us solve some of these issues. But there's a lot of really good information for the task force to read through in the public information notes. People's comments, concerns, a lot of great suggestions and ideas that I think the task force could really take a serious look at. Sorry, I'm trying to whip through this so we can get to the problem-solving portion of the meeting. Then you'll have a map, just give you some distances, has some circles on the map about where the firing line is. All the distances are from that black circle point, and distances they're out. You also should have, I don't see it, on the other side is a topography map. And you'll see, so it's about a 250-foot elevation gain to the top point from the firing line over to the landfill. So I just wanted to provide you some basic information and context and history of the site. We've also provided some late material that we'll talk about in the next item and the next steps. And I think before we go forward, perhaps if you don't mind, Chair Bagwell, if we could just say who the members are of the task force, so people are aware who they are and who is appointed. If you don't mind, would you mind if I did that really quick to help? Because I know we've already had some questions. So the two supervisors are Lori Bagwell and Brad Bonkowski. Lori is also on the Parks and Recreation Commission, so is representing that board as well. Nick Fontanez is appointed by Supervisor John Barrett. Sean Giuliani is appointed by Supervisor Stacy Gioni. David Hills is appointed by the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club. Carol Howe, to my right, is appointed by Lori Bagwell. Aaron Keller from the Department of Wildlife, he is the outdoor recreation, or outdoor sports coordinator, and he controls all that funding that NDOT so generously provided.
Thank you.
And more to come? Oh, sorry.
Steve Robinson was appointed by our mayor, Bob Crowell. Steve Schutte is our law enforcement representative, appointed by the sheriff. Terry Tussey has been appointed by Supervisor Brad Gronkowski. And then we have 3 staff people here today. Again, I'm Jennifer Bedlin, the Parks and Recreation Director. To my left is David Navarro. He's our Parks Superintendent. And then Rick Cooley is down at the end in the purple shirt, and he is with Public Works and can answer any landfill questions. So, long story short, there. Thank you.
So does any member of the task force have any questions on the background on this item? Okay. Is there any public comment on the background of how we got where we're at? Okay. Then we'll move into item D on the agenda, which is the review of the range evaluation report that was prepared by Tactical Services Group. And then also a status on the range evaluation, some notes that were received for the National Rifle Association and the Shooting Sports Foundation. Ms. Budge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. You have a copy of a report provided by Ed Santos of the Tactical Services Group. We received about 6 or 7 names from the NRA of possible consultants that we could hire. The NRA is wonderful, but they have very limited resources, so we were concerned about the timing of waiting just for that report, knowing that we wanted multiple reports anyway to compare and contrast with our situation. We hired at the Tactical Services Group. They were the best fit, not the lowest price, and had the most experience with this type of setting. He conducted early January his report. You have a full copy of the report. And then after your report, you have a summary that I prepared. It was not prepared by Tactical Services Group. I tried to use the wording that he used where possible, but I wanted to try to condense that more than 20 pages into just a few to help you guide me with where we have deficiencies and what issues that we have. To go over just sort of an overview of what the findings were. Our backstops, and I want to make sure we're using consistent terms. So the backstop is where you're supposed to be shooting toward. The berms are lateral berms, and intermediary berms would be berms within the range. I want to just make sure that we're all using the same language. I am still learning with a lot of this, so I don't pretend to even be an expert. But many people in this room have been very helpful in educating all of us. So the backstops don't all overall meet the minimum recommended standards. In the 2012 NRA range source book, which I have a copy here, if anyone needs to look at it at any point, I'm happy to share that with you. The side berms don't meet minimum standards. We have evidence of improper shooting behavior, especially in the shooting bays. People shooting into the side berms, which they're not backstops, so they're not designed to impact that. We also have inadequate signage throughout the facility. And then the greatest amount of issues are within the long range, the most significant. We don't have any lateral berms on the long range. And these are all things that can be resolved. It will take time and it will take money. We'll need the assistance of a professional engineer on some of these items, not on everything, to help meet those things. And then, the short range and the shooting bays have similar issues, not as severe as the long range, but with the backstops and the berms not quite meeting standards. The short range and the bays are closer to being minimum standards than the long range are, and are most likely kind of what I call the low-hanging fruit that we could probably resolve quicker, cheaper, and easier. It's not going to be overnight, but it would be much quicker and easier to resolve and get that to minimum standards based on both reports. You have a copy of the report in front of you. I'd like to tell you what the NRA said when they were here. They were just here on Monday. I don't have a hard copy of the report, but I did provide a little overview for you of what their findings were. And they did discussed some things that were not in the Santos Tactical Services report, but did echo a lot of the same findings as well. The NRA felt that there were grade or slope deficiencies in all of the ranges. They don't meet the slope recommendations to not exceed 2% slopes, which further contributes to not only drainage issues in some areas, but can also promote ricochet and some other behaviors that we obviously don't want to have occurring. The long range is the most significant of the slope concerns, from anywhere from 2.8% to 5.7%, and we want it no greater than 2. I've provided a map handout for you as late material that shows you just the long range. Public Works was wonderful and came out and shot grades for the long range course. We'll get this as well for the short range and the pistol base, as well as a tool that you can see what the grades are of that range. The backstops do not meet the minimum recommended standard, including the intermediary berms, so the berms within the range, as well as the side berms or the lateral berms. The biggest issues are in the long range, as I mentioned before. The short range and the shooting bays will require less work to meet to the minimum standard. The lateral berms, there are no lateral berms on the long range. Lateral berms should be constructed to meet minimum standards. The short range and the bays require less work to become to that minimum standard. There is, again, evidence of operational issues and misuse in the pistol bays, again, using the lateral berms as backstops, which they weren't designed to be. There are drainage issues throughout the whole site. We need to have drainage all to be ended up at the single point with a double retention basin to meet environmental stewardship requirements. We have to, we should implement a target placement zone on the pistol bays. A lot of people, as you've seen, shoot from their trucks in the parking lot if there's no oversight. When we've had range safety officers, on site, that shooter behavior has definitely improved, and we have people shooting from the appropriate locations, which has helped create a safer environment. But without oversight, a lot of people, if you're new or you don't know, you show up and you might be shooting from the parking lot behind the bollards. So we need to improve that. Primary issues overall, they mentioned, are ricochets and overshot. We did take the NRA representative to the exact same locations. We took Mr. Santos over to the landfill. He also met with landfill staff to, hear from their observations. But the primary issues from their perspective was target placement, which is an operational issue, shooter behavior, which is an operational issue, and bullet containment, and that's the design deficiencies that we pointed out in both reports, and that we don't have an environmental stewardship plan, which is recommended by the NRA.
Thank you for such great news. Okay, does members of the committee have questions on the reports, ideas, thoughts, pathways, solutions?
I do, but I don't know where to make it.
Before we, just really quick, I want to point out some other late material, and I think we might get into this. There's an item that I handed out about resolving deficiencies, and we did have some very good discussions with the NRA representative. He had wonderful suggestions, some really easy solutions, and some things that we're going to have to figure out in the long term. I think we have a few things that we can do in the first 3 months, some things in 6 months, and then some, further long term. But we've identified some of those. The issues as we've discussed are grading, the berms, the backstops, signage, and operation. In the short term, one idea we could do, and for discussion among the group and obviously input by the public, is hire an engineer with experience in range design. We just need a simple plan drawing. We don't need anything overcomplicated. We don't need architect drawings, but we do need a plan for each range to just identify the borrow areas for the dirt work, the quantities, and estimates of probable cost, so we can move forward and figure out how much is that going to cost and what's kind of those low-hanging fruit that I was talking about, and being able to fund and maybe make happen fairly quickly. We also need to identify a funding source to support that hiring an engineer. Once those plans are complete, should we go that route, we need to identify funding sources for those estimates of probable cost for work and implementation. And I think the short range and the shooting days will require less work and be more feasible for implementation. So I think those will be within reach. at least from the discussions we've had, with the NRA and our other consultant. Some things we could do is add some dirt to the berms to increase the shooting bay height, to meet the recommended standard. Resolve some of the grade issues, which aren't as severe in the bays, and resolve the drainage issues. We'll need the assistance of the engineer to figure that out, because we have some interesting things happening over there, and you don't want a pond where you're trying to put your target. So, and also there's a little bit, some boulder and rock work that probably needs to be removed in the backstop so we don't have ricochets. But the good news is the NRA didn't feel like the rock outcropping was as big of an issue as Mr. Santos felt it was, because it's beyond the 20 feet in the backstop. So if you're shooting in the right area and your shooting behavior is controlled, that shouldn't be an issue. And then Bay 1, we need the northwest corner, just isn't sufficient, and that is a primary issue. But those could be some easy fixes that we could do. The short range, add dirt to the backstop and the lateral berm to increase the height to the minimum recommended standard. Resolve the drainage issues. We have short-term and long-term, as I've addressed. Resolve the grade issues and signage. And we can put some temporary signage. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or expensive. We can phase that in as well. Long range, we need to resolve the slope issues and regrade the majority of the range. Construct lateral berms, which are not there, and then resolve the drainage issues short and long-term and signage. So the long range is definitely the biggest problem to solve. Long-term needs, we do need an operational control plan. We need to identify revenue sources, public user groups, management, maintenance, education, and how are we going to address those things. Resolving drainage issues, especially the long-term drainage issues which impact the environmental stewardship plan, and then assessing timing with the landfill build-out and potential future conflicts as the landfill becomes, more into the line of sight. And as Rick said, that's, probably 5 years plus, but it's a consideration we need to have sort of in the back of our mind.
Let me just make double check. Is that all for you?
Yes.
Okay, that's all right. I thought you were done.
Proceed fast, yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Terry?
I contacted, sports world, shooting sport, person. Now, I don't, all I'm doing is just letting them know. But we have contacts, I have contacts in the shooting sports. So hopefully, we'll get some response.
That'd be wonderful. That would be wonderful, Terry. I'll just come in and go on.
Thank you, this is David Hills. Looking at all, we have a lot of information in front of us. And I think we have three major categories. Number one, we have design issues with the range. Everybody in this room wants the range to reopen. How is that going to look? Because we have design issues that need to be remedied. I would say we would want these prior or during current operations. We've heard from many users of the range, both public, commercial, but we also have the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club, who is somewhat of a major user and we're a nonprofit organization. So we hold events for education and promoting of shooting sports. Our reservations were also canceled, so this also impacts our operation. So we have the design deficiencies or improvements, or however we want to phrase it, design. We also have fiscal now obligations, because every one of these items are going to cost money in funding sources we need to identify to help resolve these issues. And the last thing I see is, personally, I believe is the major one, is operations. How is the city, what do you want the model of the range to look like as we move forward? Is there going to be required RSOs at every time something is going on? Is there going to be an on-site manager? Is it going to be similar to Douglas County or Sand Mountain, where you have an unattended public facility for the betterment of the community, where you simply pay an entry fee? and then go forward, follow the rules. You know, so that's, I think, the three major categories. And under operations, the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club is providing RSOs to help maintain and keep the range open currently on Sundays. You know, we have a very limited pool of people who are volunteering their time they're extraordinary individuals who are donating their time to maintain this for the public, as all of our reservations would cancel, the same as any commercial entity. So it puts us in a difficult position because we're unable to hold our events, but at the same time, you know, we're trying to help the community to resolve this as a user group. And that's the biggest question I have is what does the city want this structure to look like as we move forward? And I think that would dictate operationally kind of where we go as far as operations are concerned. Okay, anybody has any comment?
From my perspective, I think that's what this work group is for, is to bring recommendations forward to the board or the city so that we can look at those, and if they're reasonable recommendations, then we would accept those and move forward based on those recommendations.
Okay.
From Endow, I noticed on the agenda that you guys had tried to commission a report also by the Sports Foundation. Do you have any update for us on that? So you put me on the spot.
Yeah, no, Aaron Keller, for the record, United Burn Wildlife. I reached out to the National Shooting Sports Foundation and the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports, both national organizations that Department of Wildlife is a member of. We haven't received any real replies except for the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. Doesn't have the ability to make it happen kind of on a timeline. And I'm still waiting to hear back from the National Shooting Sports Foundation in Washington, D.C. So no real report as far as a response from them. I guess just to give a little background is that I wanted to get kind of an unbiased look at the shooting range, both from a hunter education and a shooting sports perspective. And so that's why we reached out to those groups.
So may I ask them, I really want to move this forward, and I hate to have an outstanding report that can come in and maybe contradict or have a different viewpoint, because I really see us needing to move forward. Do you see any issue with us taking the two reports and maybe we talk between us of starting on the short term, right? The low-hanging fruit that we could already, maybe we all decide that we're going to concentrate on the bays and how do we get those fixed and opened, and then we move to the next section and we move to the next section. That's how I overall see this, is what can we do quickly that opens any section of the range, unless anyone here sees it differently.
Yeah, I would kind of just leave that open to the task force as far as like what the goal is.
So if you don't think we don't need to wait for
if we want to wait, we can. If we want, I mean, I don't think we should necessarily wait, but I think that if the Shooting Sports Foundation comes through with being able to have somebody come out and take a look at the range, I don't think it'd be a negative thing, no matter where we are in our process, to add in a professional opinion. I also would, I guess, challenge the task force to come up with some sort of a timeline, right? A plan of like when we think we should have some things done, whether that's opening up short term or partially opening the range for different days or whatever that is. But I think that the task force should take that upon themselves to kind of come up with a rough timeline.
Task force have a thought on how we should proceed?
I think that we're working with.
Can't wait until we're back in the other meeting room, but for now, this is working.
I think that having another opinion is a wonderful idea. I think that you already have 2 very good reports from agencies that this is what they do, and the NRA promoting shooting sports. I would imagine that National Shooting Sports Foundation is probably going to have similar findings. I can't imagine there's going to be anything in there that's going to contradict. There may be a different point of view that this individual has that on one particular item, but I think it's going to probably encompass the same items that we already have.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So what about the idea of trying to, do we all agree we should concentrate first on an area that gets something open? You know, I just think we need a little bit of maybe the timeline, or again, what goal are we driving first so that we have a mission to.
Make a motion on something?
No, we can't make any motions, because this is a discussion only, so, but if we all throw out ideas of where we wanna go, then the next.
We're taking.
Right.
And Chair, if I will, I just want to interrupt at the moment. All of that does seem to be more aligned with the next item, so we may want to proceed to the next item so we can discuss where to go from here.
Okay, because all of this is in the evaluation report, but that's okay, let's see, right? Oh, this is.
I didn't get introduced, but my name is Todd Reese. I'm with the Deputy District Attorney, and I'm just here to watch out for the open meeting law.
Can I make a suggestion?
So I will take public comment then on item D.
Okay, do I need a mic?
Sorry about the mic, you
That's
guys.
fine.
Can't get it recorded for the open meeting law.
Dave Westford again. Certainly, a lot of these recommendations involve the movement of dirt, grading, embankments, and I know it costs a lot of money, but the thing that I'm wondering is, since this is brought on primarily by the landfill, no offense, they have more heavy equipment than anybody. Why can't they use it? Since they caused the problem, I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but it's because of their concerns that this has arisen. And so you are more able to move dirt than anybody in this town. I don't know of a contractor, I don't know anybody that can move more dirt than you can. And so what would it take for you to bring your equipment just over the hill and you could fix these things, okay? You could be an active participant, you could help fix the problem, and I don't know, that's a suggestion I have. We don't need to spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars with an outside contractor when I believe they could do a better, faster, and you can make it the way you like it.
You need to address the chair, always.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Please. I'm sorry, I didn't know that, okay, I'm sorry. And so they would be able to do it and to their satisfaction. And then that way there would be no, we would like this, and we don't feel safe with it like that. Then that way they could make it the way that they like it, the way that the NRA likes it, and whoever else put in their opinion. And I believe it would be much more expeditious and done the way they like it, the way they would feel comfortable working in that situation. They say they don't feel safe over there, so then make it how you feel to be safe. And so I just think it would work on many fronts, save the city a ton of money, time, everything else, and make it the way that they would like it. So just a thought.
Thank you. There's lots that goes into public work, but thank you.
Sure.
Further public comment?
Christy Scott again. Since this issue came up because of the allegation of the rounds hitting the landfill, do we have any reports from OSHA or the DIR as far as the employee safety and what they need to do? First question. The second question is the issue with the bays, is that why we can't open on Saturdays, is because the concern is that rounds are going to go? Because the dump is open on Saturdays?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't matter how many RSOs we have out there or what range we shoot, because the landfill is open, that's what's closing
For Saturday.
the range. Well, that's what's closing the range, period.
Right, well,
Yeah.
except for Sunday.
But my question is, well, for all of the instructors, it's a moot point, because we can't use it then. Have there been any reports from OSHA or DIR that would affect this entire thing?
Not to my knowledge.
But since it's involving employees, that's not an important report to get.
We don't have the report, any reports.
Okay. It's not been requested?
We haven't.
Okay.
Do we have further public comment? Okay, then we can come back up to the task force. Oh, I'm sorry, was there more public comment I didn't see? Then we'll come back up to the task force. Supervisor Bonkowski.
So I just want to make it clear that this is not an issue driven by the employees out at the landfill. It's a public safety issue. Every member that lives in this community or the surrounding communities that uses our landfill has a right to go into that landfill and be safe. So we now have a conflict. It's an existing conflict. And so maybe we weren't as aware of it as we should have been prior to commissioning this report, but it is an issue. It's not an alleged issue, it's an actual issue. There's a conflict between the use of the landfill and the use of the rifle range. And our purpose here is to resolve the conflict, not to point fingers, as I think Terry said at the beginning of this meeting. We need to come up with resolutions and then figure out how quickly we can implement those resolutions and how we're going to pay for those resolutions. That's the facts. So everybody in this room needs to work together. We're all on the same team. And nobody here is trying to close the landfill. We want to get it open as soon as possible. Everybody in this room. But the fact is, the range, I'm sorry. But the fact is that there is a conflict. There are bullets entering the landfill and the public has a right to be safe. I can tell you that now that we are aware of this in writing, if somebody got hit by a stray ricochet at the landfill, a member of the public, the city would be open to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that we would lose. So there is an actual conflict. We're here to resolve it. We're here to resolve it as quickly as possible, and we're asking for everybody's help.
Can I respond to that?
No, we're at the task force section of this, and then we'll move back to final public. Is there anybody else on the task force that wants to comment on agenda item D? Bob?
Point of clarification. Do we have an issue in the 4 south bays with ricochets going over the hill? Has that been verified, or is the primary source of the ricochets coming off the rifle and the pistol, covered pistol ring? But do we have an issue with the 4 bays?
Thank you, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. The primary issues are in the long range and the short range, but we do have deficiencies on the bays that could contribute to ricochets. It is an easier thing to fix. It's less scope of work, but I do feel like we need to make sure that the bays are brought to the minimum recommended standard before adding hours while the landfill is open. And it won't take much to get there.
Okay,
but
so
I think that's the right thing to do now that we've been put on notice. We need to achieve that minimum recommended standard.
So that could be the fastest source of getting part of the range open for these people that are trying to put on CCW classes and so forth.
Correct, and staff in your late material, the resolving deficiencies, we have some sort of quick and easy solutions for those bays. We'll have continued erosion and continued sloughing and maintenance issues that are occurring in the bays right now. The NRA representative had some great suggestions about introducing K-rail into the side berms, so we have some more structure with those side lateral berms, and then having dirt on top, and it'd be a better long-term solution. If we were going to do something like that, this is the time to do it, when it's sort of, we'll call it the off-season, even though it's been beautiful and a lot of people are out there shooting, so we don't have to close it again to maybe continue to maintain those repairs. So we have some basic scopes of work, but like I said, we do need an engineer to take a quick look and draw some plans up for us for each of the ranges.
Mr. Sheedy?
Steve Sheedy. and.
I have a question, I'll talk to you, but it's for the dump. We don't have an overall ballpark figure of how much this is gonna cost for any of it yet. And, the gentleman here from the landfill was saying we're looking at 5 years maybe, and are we fighting this battle again in 5 years? Are we gonna spend $1, $2, $3, $5 million on the range and be back here in a couple of years doing the same thing?
No, I think what we're looking to do is to actually, we'll get in another agenda item that will discuss that, but to put some groups together that will maybe take the lead on, here's some short-term solutions and here's some, I know the one that wants to do the long-term solution over there. So I see that being two areas running parallel so that we don't get 5 years down the lane and have to close it again. I think our objective with this task force is to create the responses for the long-term solutions also. So you're on the right track. What I'd like to do, because I think we're moving along in here, is take a final public comment on item D, and then we'll move into the action items and the discussion points where we can all do that. So I'll take final public comment on item D, which was the reports. So you would confine your comments to the reports we received. Okay, then we're going to move on to item E, which is the discussion and possible actions for us to establish working groups, assign responsibilities, set meeting schedules, priorities, some of the things we talked about earlier. So I'll throw one out to get us started, is I think we should concentrate getting the bays open, because I think that's probably the largest community impact, unless I'm seeing something wrong there. But, and I see on here that one of the things I think that Supervisor Bonkowski and I could work towards is the hiring of the engineer to get those baseline drawings and work done so that we can get estimates and know what we need to achieve to get the fastest opening of the bay. So I'll throw that out as an initial discussion.
I agree, this is David Lewis. I think getting the 4 bays open for all users is probably the first concern. Again, is that going to be open 7 days a week then?
That's the goal. Right.
Perfect. I think that's ideal. So that way we can at least have a minimum area where it's open to the public and entities, nonprofits, so that we can get back in and start utilizing it right away. Does the city have, as now we're in action items, does it, as a recommendation potentially to Board of Supervisors, is there funding sources available within the city and other resources that we can utilize? For example, anybody from Public Works who can operate heavy equipment we can use within the city, and then reimburse it probably between those departments rather than hiring outside entities, which most likely would generally cost more and may have longer lead times.
I don't know that longer lead time is right or not. Oftentimes, staff is pretty dedicated to the activities that they have. And so if we divert them from that, then maybe a road's not getting done, maybe some other construction project that gets pushed or delayed.
Understandable. And
so,
this is more just a question to find out what resources we have.
I think that the Park and Rec Commission and the Board of Supervisors and then the city staff itself will be able to take any recommendation, and we'll really put a proper thinking cap on it to say what resources can we bring to bear to accomplish whatever the task is. And it may very well be a little piece, somebody earlier said, use part of the landfill equipment and an operator. We may be able to do quick pieces of that, we may not be able to, but I think for the purposes here, the best thing is to set the direction And then we'll try to put all the resources we can to accomplish it. Just can't promise you which answer.
In the interim, after we meet today, our task force will be dismissed. Obviously, we're gonna be setting up other additional meetings. Is it possible to obtain that information from the city of resources, funding, availability for our next meeting, and then set an agenda item for that to take action on?
We certainly can put that out as a potential. I don't see that the city's going, I'll say from my own personal perspective, I can't speak for everyone in general, but I don't see that it's that we have a pot of money that just says, we currently have no budgeted pistol range repair budget. I'm just gonna say that. So I think we're gonna need some of these other answers and then put some tools to it and get you some numbers and things like that.
But one question may be, I believe that currently the city is actually discussing its budget. Maybe
for next year.
For next year, is it possible, a recommendation of the task force to city supervisors to actually add a line item for continuous funding for maintenance operations, whatever that may be.
I see that as something that could come out of this, especially when we get into what you talked about, the operations. Yeah. If people want to give pros and cons and things that we should do operationally. Absolutely. Ms. Fudge?
Thank you. I just wanted to share I asked the city manager if we could have some money for an engineer to hire him so we could get going, and she said yes. So we'll be able to move on that item right away. The engineer will be critical, not only for the design piece, but to give us those estimates for cost so we can know how much money do we need to go after, should the city be part of it, and how are we going to go about it, what's our funding strategy going to be. Okay. So thank you to Nancy Paulson for making that happen first.
So I'm assuming then that's really task number one, and that's relatively quickly?
If there are any recommendations on engineers to seek out that have range experience, if you just provide names to me, let me know. I already have a couple that the NRA provided us, but depending on work availability and things like that, I want someone with experience.
So my question would be, I'm a civil engineer, I'm not going to do this, but earthwork is earthwork. I mean, it's going to take compaction ratios, fill materials, constituent component, to make sure that everything is within spec. I would say that you may, the committee may just want to look at, it may not necessarily need somebody who's experienced in range design. Anybody who's done cut fills, grading programs, land development, they're all going to have the skill set necessary to probably complete this task. So therefore, it would open up a broader pool of potential candidates.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and we have a lot of local talent here, that deal with dirt work all the time, and there's compaction guidelines in that NRA range source book. We can provide that material, for whoever we retain, but before we pick someone, I need to make sure they're available to make this a work priority for them. So that's probably the most critical.
Yeah, can you do this in a day? Yeah. The sooner the better. Are we all in general? Public comment comes before we make any final motions. We'll come to a public comment, but we start first here. In general, are we liking the idea of doing the bays first? I really want to try to help come to some consensus so that staff is working smart for us where we want to go. So that's a general consensus on the bays. Carol, did you
I agree. I think
Yes.
we need to get something open for the public, like yesterday.
Okay.
So that they know, the public knows, the businesses know that we are working to the end to get them back out there.
Okay, I like that idea too. Is there, from the task force side, is there any other specific thing that you think in this next 2-week area that we should be trying to address? How about?
Just a quick question.
Okay. Yes.
Aaron Keller, Nevada Farm Wildlife Federation. I was just curious if there's, and this might be my ignorance, I guess, is there a mechanism, if somebody from the public or a local company wanted to donate time or equipment or expertise, is there a mechanism in the city to do that? I guess?
Thank you, Jennifer Budge. There is a mechanism to do that. I do want to have a plan set, so we're building to a certain standard. That's the minimum recommended standard by the NRA. But yes, we have mechanisms for, we can do a $0 contract if it's a big construction company. If it's some simple handwork and a volunteer day, you just sign a waiver and you can come work for us. We have a lot of different mechanisms to be able to do that.
Okay, maybe us as the task force, maybe we can
Bring to bear some help.
kind of, yeah, some sort of, or I mean, not that. I know there's gonna be plenty of help once we ask for it. I'm saying delineate that a little bit. So if people wanted to, we could, I guess, contingent on what the engineer says as well. But.
Yeah, I think once we get a plan set, then we can identify the scopes of work or how we can divide up that work.
Yeah,
and what might be reasonable and what resources we have out in the community that are willing to donate, their labor and their time.
Yeah, great.
Do you have are you thinking somewhere in the next 2 to 3 weeks having that? What's the game plan there? Push. I know we're pushing on you, but the longer we let that go, the longer it's not open, so.
I'll do my best to find an engineer that has time available, but they're gonna need time to prepare this, and we want them to do it in a proper way. So I wanna be respectful of that professional that we hire.
Okay, and then some other items that, we can do is establish some leaders if we want. If some of us on the task force feel strongly about a certain area and you'd like to lead that section of the task force, we may be able again to help move the body as a whole. Like maybe there's somebody that wants to coordinate volunteers and says, hey, we need a work day, we've got the work plan, so maybe somebody on this committee would love to be the person in charge of the call out to the community to say, come on, we need the shovels, it's an idea, maybe somebody wants to take.
We have a volunteer coordinator and we'll commit her time and effort to do that. So that way the task force can focus on the areas where we don't have resources.
Okay. Long-term planning strategies. Is that what Bob wants to do? Okay.
If we don't, we're gonna be back in this mess
We're gonna
every
be
3
right
years.
back at it. Anybody else think of a task they would like to be the leader of?
I would like to volunteer for operations.
Operations?
Both short and long term, looking at how the range will be operated and making recommendations to the task force along with anybody.
So the leader of the particular work group would gather all the information and put things together to us. It can't technically bring a recommendation, but we'll just take a leader for each of these work areas, and then you can gather some helpers to put that information and resources together. Sounds like somebody said they wanted to help you, but does anybody on the task force have a problem with keeping someone? Is everybody okay?
You're asking for a leader, but does the committee or the subcommittee, Carol Howell, does the group that you're forming, a leader, are we going to have one person do this, or under the whatever rules, have 2 members so that you've got a committee of 3 working on it?
We're gonna have one leader, and then that leader can reach out to other members if they want, or to the public to gather the information and bring it back to the committee as a whole.
Well then, I have an issue here. Operations is currently under the Carson City Rifle and Pistol Club, under their lease agreement. So how does this group work with that group without them just duplicating what they've already got? I know you are. That's why I'm asking you.
The findings of the work group may or may not reflect current day operations and how that occurs. So, in my particular position as the representative of the Rifle and Pistol Club, I would have the ability to get information from the club on what is it that they want, or what do they have the availability to provide, and along with other members of the group, of the committee, to make those recommendations to the task force.
But then you've got the same group, and I'm supposed to be talking to you.
Please.
That you've got the same group making the same rules that they've been voting on all along.
Your concern is, as the leader, he's the same group on the operations. Does that make sense? What she's trying to say, it's potentially a conflict.
When I think we want the task force to look at it with a clean slate. Of course, you look at the current operation, but what are the other options available to us out there?
Right.
Whatever those might be. So,
yeah, that basically is my concern.
Right. The conflict. Okay.
This is Todd Reese. I'm going to jump in here for a second. The reason why we're appointing a point person for this is because of me.
I'm blaming you.
If this group establishes subcommittees that are empowered to make recommendations to this group, then those subcommittees are also subject to the open meeting law, and we'll have to notice them, record them, I will have to attend them, and we'll have to do everything.
It'll take a long time.
So if we have a point person in charge of these different areas, then that person himself, much like, for example, the governor, isn't a group doing something, so that person can make recommendations.
So we're after. And again, though, this group we can decide who the point person is.
And as a last caveat, that doesn't preclude the point person from talking with and incorporating whomever he needs to talk to, including members of the board, members of the community, anybody else, to gather whatever information is necessary to make the appropriate recommendations.
But they can't have a meeting. They couldn't get a group of people together
to gather information.
To gather information and make suggestions.
The board can't appoint a group to do that. However, the point person can have a meeting with whomever he wants, including members of the board, as long as a quorum is not present, to gather the information that's needed.
I'd like to be in the committee.
Wonderful.
So let's start with first in general, because then we'll go to some public comment. So we're in general agreeing that the city's going to get the engineer to give us the preliminary work. We're going to have a goal to work on the base first. We'd like a point person for operations. And right now, did that right? David, I'm sorry. David would like to be that point person. Do we have any other work groups that we want to have a point? A long range was Bob?
Yes. On the operations side, within the Park and Rec Department in Carson City, we have a fabulous shooting facility that has a track record of how to run a shooting range, and that's Carson City Gun Club, the shotgun range. So if you want to, and the rifle and pistol range is preparing to move into a new era where it's no longer going to be free reign and wild, wild west out there. It's going to have to be organized and controlled. Now, hopefully, we don't fall off the deep end and make it an anarchy like it is up at Pyramid Range, where you can't go up there and blow your nose without their permission. But still, we're going to have to probably charge a fee. We're going to have management. We're going to have some personnel. So go talk to the people in Capital City Gun Club, find out what they've done, how they've done it. They might even take over the management for you. Okay, they're already busy. They've been doing it for 15 years. So they got all the computer software in place. They got all the personnel. They got the order. They know how to run the place, and they've been very successful.
Anybody else on the committee have some other recommendations? So who wants to help? Anybody want to help in the design and once we get this result, would anybody like to be a point person to help in that arena? On the construction, the design, the funding? I guess I could do that. I'm looking around. Yeah. Nobody?
I think we should probably, I mean, as a collective, really.
Want to do that one collectively and just
Yeah.
kind of come back, so not a point? And I think I'll take on the funding, just because I probably have the information from multiple sources. Unless I've got someone else here that would like to take that.
And then Aaron wants to.
And Aaron? I'm just gonna take Aaron's money. Okay. All right, then we won't take any motions yet. Is there any public comment? I'm gonna get that. I want some public comment on any of these other operational or things like that, if they have any thoughts on. Terry?
Yeah, Terry Tessie. I'm wondering if we can't use some kind of a $25 fee to get a swipe-through card that would control the gate. And that would put money in the bank, and hell, it could be more, but put money in the bank. And my idea would be that here's the 100 safety points, which is, used to be 10 questions, it's pretty simple. And they could fill it out. If they passed it and paid the $25, they get the pass. And then if we sit down, as we said before, really where we gotta watch out. You know, the high power range and the last 4 bays and the high power range. Something like that, we should communicate with the guy who just paid $25. He'll listen to it. And as far as having the Bob's idea, having Tommy do that, I'd be happy to take that on easily. And I've known him for almost 60 years. And we've been in the gun business a really long time. And beyond that.
So do we have any, I think I saw Chris's hand back there. Okay, we're in public comment.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Patterson. A couple of the folks here mentioned, or at least touched on, when the bays are reopened, which this is outstanding, really, this is phenomenal that this is happening. But I just want to confirm and make sure that the bays won't just be available to businesses and clubs, so they're available to all individuals.
Yes.
I just want to clarify and make sure, correct?
The objective is to open the bays 7 days a week, and then we will look to some operational ideas. Don't have the answer on that yet, whether we'll make, just an example, not a pronouncement, maybe one of the 4 bays is reservable so that the coursework can happen, and 3 are general public. I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
And that's a great idea also, but I understand the businesses and they need to operate and do their thing, but the general public, I live in an area here in town where I have shooting on a regular basis, even when the club, or when the range was still open, but now I have morning to night shooting going on. We have people going in our backyard doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that wouldn't even know that this area would exist had some of these areas not been closed off. There's people that aren't dropping down into Brunswick Canyon. And I just want to promote the shooting for individuals back on the range so they're not finding these other areas and doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely agree with you.
And the only other thing I really wanted to touch on, which was brought up, the possible conflict with the club. It's really unfortunate. The club's worked very hard, I know, over these many years for us members, just individuals shooting out there. But there has been a lot of conflict of interest lately with individuals and the club, even just shooting out of the range with the individual RSOs. You know, one guy may be a vet from all sorts of wars, and another guy may be, you you know, the RSO supervisor, and they're gonna conflict. I don't think Mike Steve does. And they're gonna conflict with how to shoot and operations of it. So that's the other from an individual standpoint of the community, is that the best is made to keep from the club being overly involved.
Thank you.
See, he does it to me every time. Microphones.
Thank you. Is there any further public, Mr. Moore, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, just a thought, Kenny disappeared before I could express this. I haven't heard anybody at this meeting discuss the outside shooting outside the range. That's, I gather, not a rumor, because that was brought up at the community meeting also. And as such, has anybody like Kenny tried to get a shot designator, either through the National Guard or a larger law enforcement agency that within a quarter second can identify where a shot comes from and immediately be able to dispatch someone to that area? There's rumors going around that increased patrols and stuff like that, but they can't patrol 24 hours a day. Some of the military units that have these can come in and use it as a training exercise at no charge to us. Some of the other larger law enforcement agencies that have these instruments may be able to come in and use it as a training at no charge to us. Either that, or we may have to board the law enforcement people. But just a thought, because I haven't heard anything on the analysis of the bullets that are on display as to, yes, they definitely came from the range, no, they didn't come from the range. You know, you hear about casings up at the radio control place. There's all stuff going on. This would help him in his ability to properly staff his officers.
Thank you. We'll pass that information on to him. Thank you. Do you have any other public comment?
Unless somebody else, because I've already had public comment there.
I'm Chrissy Scottigan. I'm with Baltimore Ammunition and Firearms, and as you know, we have done whatever we can to support the city and the range. We've offered to do the free RSO classes, and contrary to what some statements have been made, we're here to help the city. We're here to also help our customers, and they're very frustrated, and we're speaking for them. And as much as you and I have talked, I'm one of the people that helped get that first meeting with the public off the ground. So I'm not sitting back here just complaining. I'm doing what I can, whatever we can to be constructive. I would make a suggestion that if there is going to be a huge cost, and if we can do the free stuff like Jen Budge said, like the $0 contracts or whatever that is, sorry, I need to talk to you. There are also lots of us that have experience that, you know, we don't tout every single day. We have ability to do fundraising. I mean, we'd be happy to do some kind of huge fundraiser at my store. As a business, I'd be happy to pay for the bays. Absolutely, it's a cost of doing business for me. But I just, you know, I just want us to be able to do whatever we can to help. So my suggestion would be to maybe have somebody on the committee that's kind of a, not necessarily PR, but somebody that works with the community partners, like myself, like this gentleman over here that's also doing training, and everybody, I don't know how many other businesses are here, but you know, if you need something that we can provide, just speak up before you pay for it, because we've got so many contacts, ex-military, law enforcement, everything else, that we might be able to provide assistance in those areas for you. And then, can we fundraise? Absolutely. There's not any preclusion in the city, okay, because we'd be happy to do that, absolutely. Last question, is there any, because I have to refund people if I can't train on Saturday. Is there any possible way those bays will be open on Saturday afternoon?
Why can't we get, well, you can't use it for the 4 hours on Sunday?
It's only open in 2-hour blocks, and no, I already have, Sunday's Super Bowl, I highly doubt my ladies are gonna come back on Sunday.
I don't know, that might be the best day to have it. No, just kidding.
Yeah, but the problem is with the 2-hour splits, we can't legally do it that way. We have to do 4 hours minimum. So I would have to have another 4-hour slot, and I go to church on Sundays, I'm there most of the day. So that's not necessarily the best day to give to us, and I'm not trying to just throw roadblocks. But I would really like to see the landfill compromise with us, give us, I don't know, 2 to 6 on Saturday, something, anything. But I have a class of 16 ladies that are looking to me to train them this weekend. And I've got a waiting list of, I think, 15 at last count for that class only. Because they're scared and they wanna know how to use the guns they purchased from everywhere in town. So I'm trying to figure out if I go refund those people or if it's gonna be open within 2 weeks so they'll wind up taking probably 10 hours training total. But I have reached out to the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association to ask them, they have to go to committee to see if they can change that to, right now the wording is 8 hours or 2 4-hour blocks. They're gonna see if they can change it to, any combination of 8 hours within 2 weeks, so.
Can't make that commitment to you here today, but we can just make the commitment to see what we can look into.
Okay.
I just can't.
Yeah, see, because if I can do it on a Saturday, it doesn't matter how much time I use. As long as, if it's in the same day, then it's considered an 8-hour thing, so that's why I was trying to push it. Okay, thank you.
What time does the landfill close on Saturdays?
5:30.
5:30? Is there any other public comment? Okay, then I'm gonna close the public comment on item E, and I'll bring it back to the task force to see if, one, we want to make any motions, and then also to develop our meeting schedule. So, do we want to actually formalize any motions? We don't have to, we've already, you do, okay?
I'd have to make a discussion first.
Okay.
Well, in this problem, I'm sorry, it's Carol Howard. Well, we're in the middle of this problem. We've got a Nevada's, wow, sorry everybody. We've got a Nevada shooting range, sheriff's shooting range out on Schneider. I know that thing is not being used on Saturdays because I don't live far from there.
That's true.
Couldn't we as a city approach them to see if we couldn't get the use of that facility for our businesses while this is going on? Yeah.
It's worth an ask, right? Nothing hurts, doesn't hurt to
You might
ask.
have to go through the Department of Prisons and Corrections, because they own that land.
I kinda knew that when I was just gonna say something, but, I actually thought we might even reach out to them to begin with on that. So we'll make a reach out and ask.
Great facility.
It is a good facility. It is a good facility, so we will make a call out to corrections and ask if there's, or just even any block, but preferably from the testimony that I heard, you guys wanted on the Saturday. Is that what I heard from the, okay. If not Saturday, if they won't give it to us on a Saturday, is there another preference day?
Most of our people want on the weekends.
Okay, so we'll reach out and see what we can do.
There was a large cry for midweek to use too. Remember all the retirees that came out of the public meeting too.
But that was for public use. This is just to be able to accommodate the CCWs, which I think we'd have a better opportunity to ask corrections if we can use their site if it was for the training for CCWs, right? So we'll reach out and see. Can't hurt. Okay. Anybody on the task force? We just.
I live close enough, I can go by there and talk with them, unless the city has to do it.
Why don't you let us, because we'll make it as a formal. We'll try and make it a formal request. No. I used to work there. I'll help out.
Yeah, I think it's
Tell you where to
it'd be
get.
good to put it in front of the city seat and.
We'll do a formal ask, and see what we can do there. Okay. So what do you guys think? Do we need how about what kind of meeting schedule? I know that there was, in the last page of your binders, Jen had kind of put together a proposal, And I'm assuming because you, you could reserve a room, is that what this is based on, that we can have?
Availability of, and then this would be for this year. But we know what, we'll find a place. We wanted to do the first Wednesday, we did reserve that just in case.
So we can for sure have the Sierra room on the first. Mhm.
I just admit, we can do more. I just wanted, just in case.
Under action, are we still on item E?
Yes, we're still on
Does there
E.
need to be a motion to actually create the working group for?
We can, but we don't have to have a
I just
motion, we
wanted
can
to,
do it
since
by.
I wanted
either
that,
way.
that's for the attorney.
Yeah, if you're gonna appoint somebody to head up looking into something, we should probably have a motion.
Okay, well then I would make a motion that we create a working group for, operations.
Appoint a lead
Oh,
for that
perfect.
purpose.
Yeah, appoint, so.
I move to appoint so-and-so.
I move to appoint so-and-so as a lead for the operation for, consider operations.
So I volunteer with that fine if I make the motion. Okay, so I make a motion to appoint David Hillis as the
As the
lead of the working group to discuss operations.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and second, is there discussion on the item?
There were a few people that were interested in it. It seems like to avoid conflict of interest, maybe we should look at the other person that asked.
Who was the other person?
Steve also said he was interested.
Oh, Sean? Okay, well, I'll tell you what happens then. We vote on the motion. If it fails or is withdrawn, that's the process here, then we can take up another motion. So do you have any issue if Sean was the point person? This is discussion.
No, I don't have an issue. I mean, I would be assisting,
Anyway,
attending anyway.
okay. Do you want to withdraw your motion? Your choice.
Go forward, have a vote.
Okay, well, all those in favor of appointing David Hill for the operations lead, say aye. Two, I think. All those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, so the motion has failed,
That's fine.
so I'll accept another motion.
I'll motion we nominate
Sean, do you
Sean.
As the point person looking at
For the
operations.
As the point person of the operations of the shooting range.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
It was a 2-4, 2 in favor, and the rest. And there was a second by Carol. Is there a discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. So Sean will do operations. Then we'll take a motion for the long range, long term. I think Bob wanted to do that, so does anyone want to make a motion for the long range lead? Long range planning lead?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Carol, motion. For Bob Blackburn,
Yes.
and there was a second by Nick. Is there any discussion?
Was that something that we agreed to as a collective team effort as well, though?
No, that was design. We said the design we were gonna bring back to the group as a whole.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carried unanimously. And then we had fiscal, which I said I would do unless there's someone else. Okay, so I'll take a motion. I'm not gonna motion this.
I'll
Nick?
second.
I'll to appoint Lori as the fiscal lead. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone Anyone opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Did we want a motion to indicate that we want to work on the bay first, that we're all in concurrence, that we're pushing the issue of
Priority
the,
for the engineer.
the priorities today?
Yeah, I would make the motion to move forward with hiring an engineer to look at all three ranges, starting.
Make a motion to move forward with hiring an engineer to have the work done in phases, beginning with phase 1 being the bays, phase 2 being the short range, phase 3 being the long range.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I have a quick add to that. Can we caveat that we'll leave it up to the Aaron Keller, Department of Wildlife for the record. Can we leave it up to the, as far as the motion, as a caveat to leave it to the engineer, what they think is lowest hanging fruit as well? If they see another spot that we can work on that's not necessarily the short range. We have a lot of long range shooters in the audience that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe we need to restate the motion, because I thought it was to tell them what to design first.
Yeah, I'll just restate the motion. I would move forward with hiring an engineer to look at the range and to do the work in phases, subject to the engineer's recommendations, with a preference towards starting with the pistol bays, moving to phase 2 in the short range, and the third phase being the long range.
So,
And I'll second that.
the second's agreeable to that. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're good. Okay, then we'll work on the meeting times.
Before we go there, Lori, I tried to get the signage. I'll take that.
Oh, a group to work on signage?
Yes.
Great. Does anybody have a issue with that? Signage, do we have that as a work group? Okay, I'll accept a motion for Carol Howell.
I second.
There's a motion by Nick to appoint Carol Howell as the lead person for signage, with a second by Sean Girolani. Any discussion on the item? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any other work group that we need to establish that, I'm sorry, there's so much paper. Was there any I'm missing, Jen, that you felt you guys needed staff-wise? Are we missing? Or it's enough for this time?
The staff will fill in whatever blanks we've got.
Okay.
Do we need to have somebody that's gonna look at all of these recommendations?
It all comes back here. It'll all have to come back to
So
the
we're all
committee.
going to look at each one of these recommendations.
And the final answers all have to come back here, and the recommendations will come from this task force then to the Park and Rec and Board of Supervisors.
I would guess that each lead will have an agenda item at the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll
But there's some conditions that aren't covered by the leads. That's my point.
those would then just be on the task force in general.
Okay.
So I think as Brad's indicating, what we'll do is make these standing items on the agenda for reports from the leads. If that makes sense, and then we'll have additional agenda items that are the ones as the committee as a whole. If that makes sense. That work? So we had on here that tentatively, we can have a meeting on Wednesday, March 6th at 1 o'clock, right?
First one steps.
Oh, yeah, February 6th.
Oh,
March and February.
are we gonna be ready for a February 6th with any information?
Yes.
You can at least, that's only a week out, so is any of the leads or any, how about we do? I don't think she can get the public notices, because that's part of the reason on the work groups, is the legal noticing. I don't think we can do an open meeting law and meet it. I don't think we can do it on the 6th. Right, I was just gonna say, I just don't know if we can I don't think we can get there. Do we want to, just a thought, oh, it's Valentine's, I don't know if that matters, but
To the middle of the day.
the 14th, yeah, I'm just looking, I'm being real honest here, I'm looking at my calendar. So maybe on the 14th, at least for this next one, so that we're able to get a report on whether or not she could find an engineer and if the work groups have got anything to look at yet, because we really won't have anything until we've got that beginning engineer. Maybe we'll have the NRA report that we have in writing that we'd be able to see. What do you guys think of that? And then maybe the next one would be that March 6th. So we have at least the next two. February 14th and then March 6th. Is that,
What time are you looking for? Because there's a historic resources commission on the 14th.
at what time?
They start at 5:30.
So if we did a 1 to 3,
I just want to make sure you guys are out.
are you guys okay with 1 o'clock? Work for people?
You buying lunch?
No.
Oh,
I'm on the
I'll buy
fiscal
pizza
team.
for everybody.
We get our money for the
Yeah, we're good. Kind of like that, everybody for the range. So 1 o'clock on the 14th, and we'll get an analysis of location. Yeah, range. Okay. Does that work for everyone? Okay, we don't need a motion for the date and time, we'll just set it for the 14th at 1 o'clock. The next one would be Wednesday, March 6th at 1, right?
What's the requirement for the working group on public notification?
None.
None? Oh.
The next one, if we met every 2 weeks, would be February 28th.
I'd like to be able to get the Sierra Room and get onto the schedule, and then we'll try from the 6th to do them in 2-week increments, as you're suggesting. But we want to get to where we can have a,
I can't do the 28th.
yeah, we want to do clerks and microphone and meeting location. So if we do the 14th, the 6th, and then maybe, like you said, do we want to try every 2 weeks? Yeah, and then we can check the availability of our rooms and see if we can hit a, you guys want to meet every 2 weeks? Is that?
Well, I don't want to meet every month and
Yeah,
drag this thing
but
out.
what we'll do, if you guys are okay with that, we'll update this to try and do it every 2 weeks and give her a chance to get a room and a location and coordinate with both the DA's office and the clerk's office for availability. So we'll just set the 2 for now, if that's all right, and then we'll get a regular on a 2-week schedule after that.
And when are we gonna meet? The next two meetings are gonna be here or where?
We'll put it on the meeting announcement, because we're gonna try to go to the Sierra Room, knock on the microphone that everything gets installed and it works. I guess Supervisor Balankowski and I will try it out and hope everything works, because we got a brand new electronics in the Sierra Room coming up, so.
We'll know a week from today.
Yeah, we'll know. Yeah, we'll know shortly whether that's gonna work. Okay. I'm gonna get to you on final concluding public comment, just as soon as
We
we're.
need to make a motion on this, so it's just an information type thing.
Okay, come on up. We're towards the end of this anyway. so-
Well, it's coming up too, I just wanted to let those of you that are appointed to work on a specific task and area, please know that the park staff is available to assist you, so if you have questions, we can get the right staff person to help you out, lead you in the right direction, we're here to help you and figure it out together, so just know that we're here to help you.
Okay, Mr. Moore,
Okay, I'm not a member of the
task force.
Carson Rifle and Pistol Club, so I have no interest in what I'm about to say. Other than, according to the use agreement with you guys, is whereas city deems it beneficial to Carson City and the inhabitants, therefore, that the Carson City Rifle and Pistol Range be made available to the general public through the activities organized by the Carson Rifle Pistol Club, and that such an arrangement would provide the least possible financial burden to the citizens of Carson City, and whereas CRPC is willing to provide a substantial portion of the ongoing maintenance and repairs of the premises. you might want to make an amendment to the agreement before we start spending money.
So, this is a
Thank you, that's just a public comment, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so do we have any more action items or anything that the task force feels we didn't address? Did I miss anything, skip anything?
Or agenda items that you would like on there other than the study reports, the NRA report, anything else?
Hopefully a report that might come from the sportsman.
national shootings.
That can be all put together. We're gonna move to then, any member have any actual announcement, anything? Okay, just wanna make sure it's on agenda item 4.
This, Carol Howell, this report that we're looking at right now was completed by an inspector recommended by the NRA out of Idaho. Do we know his reasoning for wanting to have a 1 or 2 plain wire fence around the perimeter? And I saw his recommendation, but what's behind it? Why that fence?
I can try to answer that, Jennifer Budge. So it's, one primarily is about protecting your site and making sure that people are trespassing, which we get often, probably on a daily basis out there, are informed about where they're entering. It's a shooting range. The NRA did talk to us about that. I don't know if it'll end up in the report, but he did provide guidance, and there's some guidance within NRS, I haven't looked it up, about criminal trespass and the type of fencing and signage that we need. I'll look into that before the next group meeting and report back to you, but as a compromise, because he is from a different state. But the NRA representative was from Nevada and very familiar with the state statutes and how we can sign that and look at fencing in maybe a smaller area than the entire property, because that alone would bankrupt us. So we have to look at some alternatives. But I'll bring that information to the next meeting.
I think when we have the NRA report at the next meeting, that we can then as a group even go through specifically the items, and even we may make a recommendation that isn't overall safety needed to open the range. So just because something's in a report or recommendation doesn't mean we need to implement it immediately, and again, it might go to Bob's work group to say, is that a long-range thing that we should or shouldn't address? So I think when we have the second report, and hopefully even maybe the third one, we can compare and contrast and really make some solid recommendations to say, hey, we're gonna go with item 1, 2, 3, and 4, and concentrate on those because it gets the range open. And maybe 5, 6, and 7 are nice to haves, but they push to the other work group. So I think it's a very valid point, and I think though until we have the NRA report, and hopefully either the third one or we just move on without it, but it's a very valid point. So I see that as the agenda item.
Just as a, sorry, if we're going to be looking at the Nevada statutes, would it be wise to ask the district attorney's office for an evaluation of those statutes rather than someone?
Let's get the reports. I really want to get the second report, and if there's a statutory piece, Jennifer, the parks staff will work with the DA's staff on whether, again, is this a mandatory, an optional?
Oh, no, I appreciate that. So we actually received the statutes from the NRA that are from Nevada. I'll pull the pertinent ones out, and then we have a DA assigned to parks that we can consult with that. So we have a mechanism in place to get that assistance.
That's okay, he's here, we might as well ask him. Then we have and actually he's the pinch hitter today, so let's go ahead and volunteer Todd for as much of Ben's time as we can. He can go back and say, yeah, let's just help him out, he can go back and report.
Ben or I will be happy to.
Yeah.
And help.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna move on to item number 5. Is there any additional future agenda items that we haven't discussed that someone thinks should be on the next one? We've got a lot on there. Okay, then we're gonna move to final concluding public comment. And does anybody in the public have anything else they want to add? You guys have just been wonderful, and I want to thank you so much for being respectful and trying to help us.
Yeah, what, is there any plan or to keep people from shooting around the dump that aren't in the shooting range? Is there any way to, litigate where they can't go in that area? Because I've been at the Model Airplane Field, and it's like a rifle of just going on over there. And if you go over there, then they all haul ass, But it's like, they know they're not supposed to be there or something. Whose property is that they're on?
Can you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm Rick Taylor. I don't know anything about this procedure. Whose property are they on? Is that city property or?
Some of it, some of it's
Well,
not.
if the range is too close to the dump, they think, then they're right on top of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean.
So I can address that. Shooting is not allowed east of the range. It's Carson City property. We do have maps that our park rangers are handing out to show people where those restrictions are. We've increased patrols, not only from our park ranger staff, but the sheriff's office is assisting with that as well. So we have increased the patrols in there. Are we catching everything? No, but we're trying to have a greater presence in there. We've actually encountered a lot of wood cutting, dumping, and illegal camping in that area. So some other issues are being come to our attention, and we're resolving as well at the same time.
Is there signage being put up saying don't shoot in these areas or anything?
We'll add that to Carol's list.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there signage going to be put up? Kelly?
We're going to work on through the signage work group. But thank you. Okay, any other final? Okay, then we're on to item 7. If there's no objection, we will adjourn the meeting. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all for your hard work. And together we're going to get this done.